Hey there, viewer. I'm so excited you're here for this crazy story. Before we start, I've got a fun question for you. Have you ever had a nosy neighbor who acted like they were the boss of everyone? Maybe they peeked over your fence or told you what to do with your yard. Drop your answer in the comments below. I can't wait to read it. Oh, and while you're at it, tell me where you're watching from today. Are you cozy at home or maybe sneaking a video break at school? Also, if you love stories where mean people get what they deserve, make sure to hit that subscribe button. That way, you won't miss any of my awesome tales. Okay, let's get into it. Close your eyes for a second and imagine a super quiet street in a neighborhood. The houses are all neat and pretty with green lawns that look like they've been combed. Flowers bloom in perfect rows and every mailbox stands straight like a soldier. This is the kind of place where nothing wild ever happens, or so people thought. This is where our story begins, and it's about a guy named Jake Turner. Jake was the new guy on the block. He moved into a small, tidy house at the end of the street just a few months ago. His place had a white fence, a red door, and a big tree out front that gave shade all day long. Jake wasn't loud or flashy. He didn't throw big parties or make a fuss. He was the kind of person you might not even notice at first. He'd wave hello if he saw you, but mostly he kept to himself. He liked to fix up his yard, water his plants, and sit on his porch with a glass of lemonade. To everyone in the neighborhood, Jake was just, well, Jake, the quiet new guy who didn't bother anybody. Most people didn't pay much attention to him. Neighbors would smile and say hi when they walked their dogs, but that was about it. They were busy with their own lives, kids, jobs, and keeping their houses perfect. Nobody really stopped to wonder who Jake was or why he'd moved here. Nobody, that is, except for one person, and trust me, she wasn't the friendly kind of curious. Her name was Karen Baxter, and she was the president of the HOA. Now, if you don't know what an HOA is, it's like a club that makes rules for the neighborhood. They decide things like what color your house can be or how tall your grass can grow. Karen loved being in charge of the HOA. She walked around with a clipboard tucked under her arm, checking every house like it was her job to find something wrong. Her eyes were sharp, and her frown was so big it could scare a puppy. When Karen was around, people got nervous. She wasn't just bossy, she acted like she owned the whole street. Karen had short hair that was always perfect, and she wore bright red lipstick that made her look even stricter. Her shoes clicked on the sidewalk as she marched from house to house, writing notes about things like weeds in the garden or trash can left out too long. Nobody dared argue with her. If you did, she'd give you a look that felt like ice, and then you'd get a letter in your mailbox full of complaints. Karen was the kind of person who made you feel small, like you'd done something wrong even if you hadn't. When Jake moved in, Karen noticed him right away. Not because he was loud or messy. Oh no, Jake's house was one of the neatest on the street. She noticed him because he was new, and Karen didn't like new. New meant different, and different meant trouble in her book. From the moment Jake hung his welcome sign on his door, Karen decided he was her next project. She didn't know it yet, but that was the biggest mistake she'd ever make. At first, Karen watched Jake from afar. She'd stand across the street, squinting at his house like she was trying to find a reason to complain. Jake's grass was cut short, his windows sparkled, and his mailbox was painted the exact color the HOA wanted. But that didn't matter to Karen. She didn't like the way Jake kept to himself. Why doesn't he come to the HOA meeting? She'd mutter to herself. What's he hiding? She didn't trust anyone who didn't follow her rules to the letter. One day, Karen couldn't hold back anymore. She marched right up to Jake's house, her clipboard clutched tight. Jake was outside, watering his roses with a little green hose. The sun was shining and birds were chirping, but Karen's face was like a thundercloud. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Jake looked up, surprised but not scared. "Hi there," he said, turning off the hose. "Can I help you?" Karen didn't smile. She never smiled. "I'm Karen Baxter, HOA president," she said like it was the most important job in the world. "I've noticed your house and I have some concerns." Jake raised an eyebrow, but he stayed calm. "Concerns?" he asked. "Like what?" Karen flipped open her clipboard and started reading. "Your fence is a tiny bit too high," she said, "and those roses, they're not on the approved plant list. You'll need to fix this right away." Jake listened quietly, his hands in his pockets. Most people would have gotten mad or nervous, but not Jake. He just nodded and said, "Okay, I'll check on that. Thanks for letting me know." His voice was polite, but there was a little spark in his eyes, like he was thinking something Karen couldn't guess. She didn't like that. She was used to people saying yes ma'am and scrambling to obey her. Jake's calm answer made her feel like she wasn't in control, and that made her mad. From that day on, Karen had it out for Jake. She'd show up at his house all the time, pointing out tiny things that didn't even matter. "Your porch light is too bright," she'd say one day. "Your car is parked an inch too far from the curb," she'd complain the next. Jake never argued. He'd just smile, say something like, "I'll take care of it," and go back to whatever he was doing. That drove Karen nuts. She wasn't used to someone brushing her off so easily. But here's the thing nobody in the neighborhood knew. Not Karen, not the neighbors, not even the mailman who dropped off Jake's letters every day. Jake wasn't just some regular guy who liked to garden and sip lemonade. He had a secret, and it was a big one. It wasn't the kind of secret that hurt anyone, but it was the kind that could change everything. Karen thought she was the smartest person on the street, but Jake, he was playing a game she didn't even know about. What was Jake's secret? I'm not going to spill it just yet. That'd ruin the fun. But let me tell you, it was something that would make Karen wish she'd never knocked on his door. Every time she bossed him around, Jake was watching her. Every time she wrote a mean note, he was keeping track. And every time she thought she was winning, she was actually stepping closer to a big surprise. Now you might be wondering, what's so special about Jake? Why didn't he just tell Karen to leave him alone? Those are great questions, and I promise you'll get answers soon. For now, just picture Jake on his porch, sipping his lemonade and watching Karen storm away after another complaint. He wasn't scared of her. He wasn't even annoyed. He was waiting for the perfect moment to show everyone who he really was. This neighborhood wasn't ready for what was coming. Karen thought she ruled the street, but Jake, he was about to turn her world upside down, and the best part, she had no idea it was coming, not a single clue. Can you imagine how shocked she's going to be? I bet you're dying to know what happens next, right? Don't worry, I'm not going to leave you hanging forever. This story is just getting started, and it's going to get so good you won't believe it. So what do you think so far? Is Karen the kind of person you want to avoid, or would you try to talk to her? And what do you think Jake's secret might be? Drop your guesses in the comments. I'm super curious to see what you come up with. Stick with me because this tale is about to take a wild turn and you don't want to miss it. Ready for more? Let's keep going. Jake Turner thought his new neighborhood was going to be a calm and happy place. When he moved into his little house with the red door, he was excited to start fresh. Every morning, he'd step outside, take a deep breath, and smile at the sunny street. He'd wave hello to the neighbors as they walked by with their dogs or pushed strollers. Jake loved keeping his house neat. He mowed his lawn until it looked like a soft green carpet. He washed his windows so they sparkled like diamonds. His flowers bloomed bright and cheery, making his yard one of the prettiest on the block. At first, everything was great. Jake felt like he fit right in. But there was one person who didn't agree. Her name was Karen Baxter, and she was the boss of the HOA, the group that made all the rules for the neighborhood. Karen wasn't like the other neighbors. She didn't wave back when Jake said hi. She didn't smile or stop to chat about the weather. Instead, she watched Jake's house like a hawk, looking for anything she could complain about. From the very first day Jake moved in, Karen was on his case. She'd march up to his house, her shoes clicking loudly on the sidewalk. She always carried a big clipboard stuffed with papers, and her pen was ready to write down every little thing she didn't like. One day, she stood in Jake's driveway and pointed at his mailbox. "This is half an inch too tall," she snapped, her voice sharp like a teacher scolding a kid. Jake looked at the mailbox. It was shiny and new, painted the perfect shade of blue. He didn't see anything wrong with it, but he didn't want trouble. "Okay, I'll check on it," he said with a small smile. Another time, Karen stared at Jake's flower bed. He had planted red roses because they were his favorite. They smelled sweet and made his yard look happy. But Karen crossed her arms and shook her head. "Those flowers are the wrong shade of red," she said like it was the worst crime in the world. Jake tilted his head, confused. "Wrong shade?" he asked. "They're just roses." Karen huffed and wrote something on her clipboard. "They don't match the neighborhood rules," she said. Jake didn't argue. He just nodded and said, "I'll look into it." His voice was calm, like a cool breeze on a hot day. That calm voice drove Karen crazy. She wasn't used to people acting so relaxed when she bossed them around. Most neighbors would get nervous or say sorry right away. They'd run to fix whatever Karen complained about, afraid of getting one of her mean letters in their mailbox. But Jake, he didn't seem scared at all. He'd listen to Karen's complaints, smile politely, and go back to watering his plants or sweeping his porch. It was like her words bounced right off him, and that made Karen madder than ever. Then came the day Karen found something she really didn't like. Jake had installed a brand new gate at the front of his yard. It wasn't an ordinary gate. This one was super cool and high-tech. It was shiny silver with a little keypad where you typed a code to open it. When Jake pressed the buttons, the gate would slide open smoothly like magic. He called it his smart gate, and he was proud of it. It kept his yard safe and looked modern and neat. Jake thought everyone would like it, or at least not care. But Karen, oh boy, she cared a lot. One afternoon, Karen stormed up to Jake's house. Her face was already red and her clipboard was shaking in her hands. Jake was fixing a loose board on his porch when he saw her coming. "Hi, Karen," he said, wiping his hands on a rag, but Karen didn't say hi back. She pointed at the smart gate like it was a monster. "This thing is an eyesore," she yelled loud enough for the whole street to hear. "It's ugly and it doesn't match the neighborhood's style." Jake glanced at the gate. It gleamed in the sunlight, clean and sleek. He didn't think it was ugly at all. "It's just a gate, Karen," he said with a shrug. "It works great." Karen's eyes got wide and her face turned as red as a ripe tomato. "Just a gate," she repeated like Jake had insulted her. "This is a serious violation. You need to take it down right now." Jake stayed calm like always. "I'll think about it," he said, picking up his hammer to keep working. Karen stood there fuming. She wasn't used to someone brushing her off like that. Most people would have promised to fix it just to make her go away. But Jake didn't budge, and that made Karen decide something. She was going to make his life miserable. From that moment on, Karen was like a bee that wouldn't stop buzzing around Jake. She came to his house almost every day, finding new things to complain about. If Jake parked his car in his driveway, she'd say it was too close to the street. If he put out his trash cans, she'd claim they were out too early. One time she even said his welcome mat was the wrong color. Jake listened to every complaint, but he never got mad. He'd nod, say, "I'll take care of it," and go back to his day. Neighbors started to notice. They'd whisper to each other, "Why doesn't Jake fight back? Karen's being so mean." What nobody knew, not Karen, not the neighbors, not even the kids riding bikes down the street, was that Jake wasn't just sitting there taking Karen's nonsense. He was doing something else, something smart. Every time Karen showed up to yell, Jake was watching her closely. Every time she pointed at his gate or wrote on her clipboard, he was listening. He wasn't just being polite. He was collecting clues like a detective in a mystery book. Karen thought she was in charge, but Jake was putting together a puzzle. And that puzzle was about something big, something that would make everyone's jaw drop. What was Jake figuring out? I'm not going to tell you just yet. That'd spoil the surprise. But let's just say Karen wasn't as perfect as she acted. She thought she could boss Jake around forever, but he was one step ahead. Every shout, every mean note, every time she glared at his smart gate, it was all adding up. Jake wasn't scared of Karen. He wasn't even annoyed. He was waiting like a cat watching a mouse. And Karen, she had no idea what was coming. Can you believe how mean Karen was being? What do you think Jake was noticing about her? Drop your guesses in the comments. I bet you've got some good ideas. This story's heating up and you're not going to want to miss what happens next. Stick around because Karen's about to learn a lesson she'll never forget. Time went by and things in Jake's neighborhood got worse. Weeks turned into months, and Karen Baxter, the HOA boss, didn't let up on Jake. She was like a storm cloud that followed him everywhere. Every day, she found something new to pick on. It was like she woke up thinking, "How can I make Jake's day bad?" And she tried hard. Karen started leaving mean notes on Jake's front door. She'd stick them there with tape, and they'd flutter in the wind until Jake came home. One note said, "Your gate is so ugly, take it down." Another one complained, "Your car is too close to the curb, move it." Jake would find these notes after a long day and he'd just shake his head. He didn't rip them up or get mad. He'd read them, fold them neatly, and put them in a drawer. Most people would have yelled or thrown the notes away, but Jake stayed calm like a lake with no ripples. Karen didn't stop at notes. She started talking about Jake behind his back. She'd walk around the neighborhood, her clipboard bouncing against her hip, and tell everyone who'd listen that Jake was suspicious. "He's probably hiding something," she'd say, raising her eyebrows like it was a big secret. "Why else would he have that weird gate?" She'd whisper to Mrs. Jenkins, who lived next door, or chat with Mr. Lee, who walked his dog every evening. "Jake's not like us," she'd say. "He doesn't belong here." Most neighbors didn't believe her. They'd nod politely and change the subject. They liked Jake's quiet ways and his tidy house. But Karen was stubborn, like a dog chewing on a bone. She wouldn't give up. Jake knew what Karen was saying about him. He'd overhear bits and pieces when he was outside watering his flowers. Kids on bikes would ride by and giggle, repeating Karen's words without really understanding them. But Jake didn't let it bother him. He'd wave at the kids and keep tending his roses. He wasn't the kind of guy to start fights or spread gossip. He had better things to do, like watch and wait. One sunny morning, something big happened. Jake was in his garage fixing his lawnmower when he heard a noise by his gate. It was a sneaky kind of noise, like someone trying not to be heard. Jake peeked out and saw Karen. She was standing right by his smart gate, the shiny one she hated so much. Her hands were on her hips and she was leaning forward trying to peek into his yard. Her nose was practically touching the gate's bars and her eyes were squinting like she was looking for treasure. Jake stepped out quietly and crossed his arms. "What are you doing, Karen?" he asked. His voice was calm, but it had a little edge, like a teacher catching a kid cheating. Karen jumped like a cat who'd seen a cucumber. Her clipboard slipped from her hands and clattered to the ground. "I am just checking," she stammered, her face turning pink. "I'm making sure you're not breaking any rules." She tried to sound bossy, but her voice wobbled. Jake didn't move, he just looked at her, his eyes steady. "You're welcome to check," he said with a small smile, "but you won't find anything." That smile wasn't mean, but it wasn't friendly either. It was like he knew something Karen didn't. Karen's face got even redder. She scooped up her clipboard and puffed out her chest. "You think you're so smart," she muttered. "I'll teach you a lesson." Then she turned and stomped away, her shoes slapping the pavement like an angry drum. Jake watched her go, still smiling that quiet smile. He didn't chase after her or yell. He didn't need to. Because Karen didn't know something important. She didn't know about the tiny camera hidden on his smart gate. It was so small you'd never see it unless you knew where to look. That camera was like a secret spy, watching everything and recording it all. Every time Karen came by to snoop or complain, the camera caught it. Every glare, every mean word, every time she poked around, it was all saved. And here's the cool part. Those recordings were starting to show something very interesting about Karen. She thought she was so perfect, always telling everyone else what to do. She acted like she followed every rule and never made mistakes. But the camera was catching things she didn't want anyone to know. What kind of things? I'm not going to tell you everything yet. That'd ruin the fun. But let's just say Karen wasn't as honest as she pretended to be. She was doing stuff she thought was secret, but Jake's camera was like a little detective, piecing it all together. Karen kept coming back day after day. She'd bang on Jake's gate or leave more notes. One time she even tried to open the gate herself, thinking Jake wasn't home. She typed random numbers on the keypad, hoping it would work. It didn't. The gate stayed locked and the camera kept rolling. Jake wasn't worried. He checked the videos every night, sitting at his kitchen table with a glass of water. He'd watch Karen's sneaky moves and take notes of his own. Not mean notes like hers, just facts. Dates, times, what she did. He was building something, like a kid stacking blocks to make a tower. And that tower was getting taller every day. The neighbors started to notice how much Karen was bugging Jake. Mrs. Jenkins told her husband, "Karen's being too hard on that nice young man." Mr. Lee shook his head when he saw another note on Jake's door. Even the kids on their bikes felt bad. One boy, Timmy, rode up to Jake one day and said, "Why's that lady so mean to you?" Jake just ruffled Timmy's hair and said, "Some people just like to make noise. Don't worry about it." Timmy rode off, but he kept thinking about Jake. Everyone was starting to wonder why Karen wouldn't leave him alone. Jake stayed cool through it all. He didn't tell anyone about the camera or what he was finding out. He didn't brag or fight back. He just kept doing his thing, mowing his lawn, watering his roses, sipping lemonade on his porch. But every time Karen tried something new, Jake was ready. He wasn't just sitting there taking her meanness. He was like a chess player thinking 3 moves ahead. Karen thought she was winning, but she was walking right into a trap she couldn't see. What do you think Karen was doing that the camera caught? Can you guess what Jake's planning? Drop your ideas in the comments. I'm super excited to hear them. This story's getting wilder and you're not going to believe what happens next. Stick with me because Karen's about to get a big surprise. One bright sunny afternoon, everything in Jake's neighborhood changed. The air was warm and kids were playing down the street, their laughter bouncing off the houses. But at Jake's house, things weren't so happy. Karen Baxter, the HOA boss, was madder than ever. She stood right in front of Jake's shiny smart gate, her hands on her hips and her face red as a stop sign. She was done with Jake's calm answers and his ugly gate. Today, she was going to make sure everyone knew she was in charge. Karen started shouting so loud the whole street could hear. "This gate is a disgrace," she yelled, pointing at the silver gate like it was a monster. "I'm done asking nicely. You're breaking all the rules, Jake Turner." Her voice was sharp, like a whistle that makes dogs run away. Neighbors poked their heads out of windows, curious about the noise. Some stepped onto their porches, holding cups of coffee or phones, watching to see what would happen. Jake was on his porch, sitting in a chair with a glass of lemonade. He didn't move or shout back. He just watched Karen, his face as calm as a sunny lake. Karen didn't like that. She wanted him to argue or look scared, but Jake wouldn't give her what she wanted. That made her even angrier. She pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking, and dialed 911. "Hello, police," she said, glaring at Jake's house. "There's a suspicious person at 123 Oak Street. He's got some illegal stuff going on, I just know it." She smirked as she hung up, thinking she'd finally won. In her mind, Jake was in big trouble now. The neighbors whispered to each other. "What's Karen doing?" asked Mrs. Jenkins, peeking through her curtains. "Is Jake really bad?" wondered Timmy, the kid on his bike, slowing down to watch. Everyone was confused. Jake didn't seem like a bad guy. He was always nice, waving hello and keeping his yard tidy. But Karen sounded so sure, and she was the HOA boss. Maybe she knew something they didn't. Jake stayed quiet, sipping his lemonade. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes following Karen as she paced in front of his gate. He didn't look worried at all, which made some neighbors even more curious. Why wasn't he upset? Didn't he hear Karen call the police? A few minutes passed, and then everyone heard it, the sound of a car coming down the street. It was a police car, its lights flashing red and blue. It stopped right in front of Jake's house, and 2 officers stepped out. Karen's smirk got bigger. She crossed her arms, thinking this was her big moment. She was sure the police would march up to Jake, ask him a million questions, and maybe even take him away. She'd been waiting for this day, dreaming of proving she was right about him. "Here we go," she muttered under her breath, staring at Jake with a mean glint in her eyes. But then something weird happened. The officers didn't walk toward Jake. They didn't even look at him. Instead, they turned to Karen. One of them, a tall man with a serious face, held up a piece of paper. "Karen Baxter," he said, his voice loud and clear. Karen's smirk vanished. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Why, yes," she finally squeaked, her face turning pale like she'd seen a ghost. "We need to talk," the officer said, stepping closer. Karen blinked fast, like she couldn't believe it. "What?" she said, her voice wobbly. "This isn't about me, it's about him." She pointed at Jake, her finger shaking. Everyone turned to look at Jake, expecting him to say something. But Jake just leaned against the railing of his porch, as calm as ever. He didn't look scared or surprised. He looked like he'd been waiting for this. The neighbors were shocked. "What's going on?" whispered Mr. Lee to Mrs. Jenkins. "Why are the police talking to Karen?" Nobody knew what to think. Karen was the one who made the rules, the one who told everyone else what to do. She was always so bossy, so sure she was right. Could she really be in trouble? That's when Jake finally spoke. His voice was steady, like a teacher reading a story. "Officers," he said, standing up from his chair, "you might want to check the footage from my gate's camera." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small tablet, the kind you use to watch videos or play games. He walked down the steps of his porch and handed it to the tall officer. "It's all on there," Jake said, his eyes flicking to Karen for just a second. The officers took the tablet and tapped the screen. Everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen. The neighbors leaned forward, trying to get a better look. Karen's face went from pale to white, like all the color had drained away. "What footage?" she snapped, but her voice wasn't bossy anymore. It sounded scared. The police watched the tablet in silence. Their faces didn't smile or frown, they just looked serious. The video showed Karen clear as day. It wasn't just one clip, it was lots of them. The tiny camera on Jake's smart gate had caught her sneaking around, not just at Jake's house, but at other neighbors' yards too. She'd peek into windows, poke through mailboxes, and even dig in people's trash cans when she thought no one was watching. The neighbors gasped. "That's Karen," whispered Timmy, his eyes wide. But that wasn't the worst part. The video showed something even bigger. Karen was in charge of the HOA's money, the cash everyone paid to keep the neighborhood nice. The camera caught her taking some of that money and putting it in her own bag, not once but lots of times. She'd been stealing for months, thinking nobody would ever find out. She used the money to buy fancy things for herself, like new shoes and shiny jewelry, while telling everyone the HOA needed more cash for repairs. The officers looked up from the tablet. The tall one turned to Karen, his eyes narrow. "Ma'am," he said, "you're coming with us." Karen's jaw dropped so low it almost hit the ground. "No," she cried, "this is a mistake, that video's fake." But the officers didn't listen. They gently took her arm and led her toward the police car. Karen's shouts got quieter as she realized no one was on her side. The neighbors were stunned. They stood on their lawns, their mouths open like fish. Karen was styling, said Mrs. Jenkins, shaking her head. All this time she was the bad one, Mr. Lee nodded slowly. And Jake caught her, he said, looking at Jake with new respect. Timmy pumped his fist in the air. Way to go, Jake, he cheered. Jake didn't cheer or brag, he just stood there watching the police car drive away with Karen inside. His smart gait gleamed in the sunlight like it was smiling too. Karen thought she could bully him, but Jake had been the one to stop her. He'd been watching all along, and now everyone knew the truth. What do you think about that? Can you believe Karen was the real troublemaker? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you say. This story's getting wild and there's more to come. Stay with me because Jake, not done yet. The police car rolled down the street, taking Karen Baxter away. Its red and blue lights flashed until it turned the corner and disappeared. The neighborhood was quiet for a moment, like everyone was holding their breath. Then all at once, people started talking. Voices buzzed like bees, full of shock and surprise. Can you believe it? Said Mrs. Jenkins, her hands on her cheeks. Karen was styling. Mr. Lee shook his head, muttering, all this time she was the problem. Even Timmy, the kid on his bike, stopped riding and stared, his mouth wide open. Jake stood on his porch, calm as ever. His smart gate sparkled in the sunlight, looking prouder than ever. It was like the gate knew it had done a good job. Neighbors who used to walk past Jake without a word now came closer. They gathered on his lawn, their faces full of questions and apologies. Mrs. Jenkins was the first to speak. Jake, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice soft. We had no idea Karen was taking our money. We should have helped you when she was being mean. Mr. Lee nodded. Yeah, we thought she was just bossy, not a thief. A few other neighbors chimed in, saying how bad they felt for not stepping in sooner. They'd seen Karen leave notes and yell about the gate, but they didn't know she was doing worse things behind their backs. Jake listened to them all, his hands in his pockets. He didn't look mad or upset. Instead, he gave a small grin like he'd known this day would come. I figured she'd mess up eventually, he said. People like that always do. The neighbors wanted to know more. How did you catch her, Jake? Asked Timmy, bouncing on his toes. Everyone leaned in, curious. That's when Jake shared his secret. I'm not just some guy who likes to garden, he said, his voice steady. I used to be a private investigator, like a detective who solves mysteries. The crowd gasped. Timmy's eyes got huge like Jake was a superhero. A detective, he squealed. That's so cool. Jake explained that he'd moved to the neighborhood for a quiet life. He wanted to enjoy his roses and sip lemonade without any trouble. But when Karen started picking on him, his old detective skills woke up. I could tell she was up to something, he said. So I kept an eye on her. That's where his smart gate came in. It wasn't just a fancy gate to keep his yard safe. It was like a secret helper. The tiny camera on it watched everything, catching Karen's sneaky moves day after day. That gate did more than lock, Jake said with a chuckle. It told the truth. The neighbors were amazed. You're a hero, Jake, said Mrs. Jenkins, clapping her hands. Mr. Lee agreed. You saved us from Karen's tricks. They all looked at the smart gate with new eyes. What they used to think was just a shiny toy was now the star of the day. It had helped Jake show everyone who Karen really was. That evening, the HOA had a big meeting. Everyone squeezed into the community center talking about what happened. They didn't waste any time. Karen's out, said Mr. Lee, who helped run the meeting. She can't be our boss anymore. Everyone cheered. They were tired of her mean rules and bossy ways. Then someone had an idea. Jake, you should be the new HOA president, they said. Others nodded, shouting, yeah, Jake, you'd be great. Jake laughed, a big happy sound. No thanks, he said, holding up his hands. I'm good with just my gates. The room laughed too, but they understood. Jake didn't need to be in charge to make things right. He'd already done that. After that day, the neighborhood felt different. It was quieter, but in a good way. People smiled more. They waved to Jake when they passed his house, and some even stopped to chat. Nice roses, they'd say, or that gate's pretty cool. Jake would nod and grin, happy to be left alone but glad to have friends now. Karen's mean notes were gone, and so was her frown. The street felt lighter, like a big cloud had floated away. Jake went back to his simple life, watering his flowers and sitting on his porch. But everyone knew he was more than the new guy now. He was the one who stood up to Karen and won. And that smart gate, it stayed right where it was, gleaming like a badge of honor. Wow, what a wild ride that story was. Let's take a moment to think about what happened. Jake's neighborhood started out so quiet and normal, but then Karen tried to make everything her way. She thought she could boss Jake around because he was new and didn't talk much. She picked on his smart gate, left mean notes, and even called the police on him. But here's the big lesson. Sometimes the person you think is weak or easy to push around is actually the strongest one in the room. Karen didn't see Jake coming, and that was her biggest mistake. Think about it. Karen looked at Jake and saw just a guy with a tidy house and a fancy gate. She thought he'd be scared of her like everyone else in the neighborhood. But Jake wasn't just any guy. He used to solve mysteries for a living. He was smart, patient, and good at watching people. Karen never guessed he was keeping track of her sneaky moves with that tiny camera. She thought she was in charge, but Jake was the one who saw everything. It's like when you play hide and seek and you think you've got the perfect spot, but someone's already watching you. Jake was that someone, and Karen never had a chance. That smart gate wasn't just a cool toy either. It was more than a shiny piece of metal that opened with a code. It was like a superhero sidekick, quietly helping Jake protect his home and find the truth. Every time Karen snooped or stole, the gate's camera was there, catching her in the act. It's a reminder that the truth is strong. You can try to hide things, like Karen did with the HOA money, but sooner or later the truth comes out. It's like when you tell a little lie at school and then someone finds out. It always catches up with you. This story makes me think about how we treat people. Karen judged Jake before she even knew him. She didn't give him a chance to be her friend or show who he was. Instead, she decided he was trouble just because he was new and had a gate she didn't like. That's not fair, is it? We all meet new kids at school or new neighbors sometimes. Maybe they're quiet or different, but that doesn't mean they're bad. Jake's story shows us to be kind and give people a chance. You never know, they might turn out to be awesome like Jake. Another cool thing is how Jake stayed calm, even when Karen was super mean. He didn't yell or fight back. He just watched and waited like a detective in a movie. That takes a lot of strength. It's easy to get mad when someone's unfair, but Jake showed us that being patient can be powerful. He didn't need to shout to win. He used his brain and his gate. Maybe next time someone's mean to you, you can take a deep breath and think, what would Jake do? Staying cool and smart can make a big difference. I hope this story sticks with you. It's not just about a bully getting caught. It's about being brave, being fair, and knowing that the truth is on your side. No matter how big someone seems, like Karen with her clipboard, they can't hide forever. And no matter how small you feel, like Jake did to Karen, you've got power inside you. You just have to use it wisely, like Jake and his gate.